Well, hello, my fine feathered friends. How's it going? Welcome to D&D Optimized, part of the D4 network. This is the show where each week we take a deep dive into one, sometimes two, specific character builds for Dungeons & Dragons 5e, and we crunch numbers about them, we theory craft about them, and basically try to create a character that is both really fun to play in game, but also powerful. So if you enjoy creating characters for D&D almost as much as playing the actual game itself, then welcome home. This is where you belong, and I am really happy that you're here, so thanks for being here. My name's Colby. I'll be your host. Before we jump in, just a quick reminder, if you enjoy the content or think you might enjoy the content, please go ahead and give me a like down there in the corner. It really does help for the YouTube algorithms, and even more importantly, I would love it if you would consider subscribing to the channel so that you can watch all the rest of the stuff that we do here on the D4 network. But anyway, enough of that. Let's get started on the episode. So before I jump into the build, I want to talk about single target damage versus multi-target damage. Generally speaking, in Dungeons & Dragons, abilities and spells that do damage to multiple enemies, while they may potentially do a lot more overall damage, do less damage per enemy than a single target damage spell or ability, right? There are a few exceptions, but they are few. This makes sense, of course, because if spells and attacks that did damage to multiple targets did more damage per target than spells and attacks that did damage to single targets, well, there would never be a reason to focus on single target damage abilities, right? Now, if you had to choose between doing, say, a lot of damage to one target, or middling damage but to 2 or 3 targets or 4 targets or 5 targets or whatever, which would be the better choice? Most of the time, tactically speaking, you're going to be better off doing a lot of damage to a single target, because in that way you are more likely to eliminate an enemy, thus removing them from the fight, right? Thus preventing them from hurting your party in any way, winning the battle of action economy. If a single target focus would remove an enemy completely, but a multi-target focus would keep all of your enemies wounded but still alive and fighting, you're probably better off with the single target focus. There are, of course, exceptions to this. The biggest one is if you could eliminate one or more targets with your multi-target damage. This will probably only happen in one of two scenarios. One, when you're up against lots of enemies that are relatively weak, as opposed to 1 or 2 or 3 enemies that are particularly strong, right? So they don't have a lot of hit points, and just some kind of simple, efficient area of effect damage would wipe those targets out. Or 2, it might also happen if you have the ability to throw down some really powerful burst or nova area of effect damage, letting you, at the expenditure of limited resources, do a high amount of area of effect damage that would let you eliminate multiple enemies in a single round, or at least get them so near death that your friends can very easily finish them off quickly. I've actually only done one such build on my channel to date, the Evoker Wizard. Check it out there. I think it ended up being a fairly useful and powerful build, because even though you might not always be better off with multiple target damage in your combat encounters, there will be plenty of instances where having a character that can do a lot of strong multiple target damage will really help your party. I mean, any sorcerer or wizard can throw out a fireball and wipe out a bunch of kobolds, right? But not any sorcerer or wizard could do enough area damage to wipe out a bunch of, moderately tanky enemies. And having the ability to do that when you need it would be a pretty big boon to any party, I think. And this leads us to the Ascendant Dragon Monk, the subject of today's build. When the Ascendant Dragon Monk first came out in the Unearthed Arcana, I went on record there saying I was a little underwhelmed, but that, of course, the first thing that I would do when this subclass became official content is, do a build for one, because monks are my favorite class in the game, as many of you know, even though I feel they are generally a little underpowered. Now, last week, Fizban's Treasury of Dragons came out, along with the Ascendant Dragon Monk officially, and Wizards of the Coast nerfed it. As we discussed in our Sliding Into My DMs episode last week, I'm going to get through my cards real quick today. I don't know why that surprises me, but it does a little bit. I mean, I feel like they've been moving in the right direction with the monk recently, with the Mercy Monk and things that came out in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, which I think is quite good. But regardless, the question is the Ascendant Dragon Monk salvageable? Yeah, I think so. But I think if you're going to make it work, you've really got to lean into the things they're giving you that are unique to the subclass. This is going to mean, in my opinion, creating a character who is focused on the thing that I've been talking about, doing multiple target area of effect damage in a burst or nova capacity so as to be able to eliminate multiple targets in a nova round so you can turn the tide of a battle in your party's favor. I'm actually pretty pleased with the way things turned out for the Ascendant Dragon. So let's jump into the build. I proudly present episode 65, the Ascendant Dragon Monk, and check out the awesome artwork by my friend Randall Hampton. He always does fantastic work, and I love it when he's able to put together some concept art for the character that I build. This one is as good as the rest of them and looks just like this Ascendant Dragon Monk should look, I think. So if you want to follow Randall, I'll put links to how to do so in the video description. Be sure to check him out. Thanks, Randall, and let's jump into the build. All right, at level 1, we are actually going to start Monk for our class, but maybe we shouldn't. Let's discuss something important here that might cause you to want to start with a different class. I am building this character to do as much damage against multiple targets in a single round of combat as I can, while still being primarily a monk. The thing about Nova builds, of course, is that you need to figure out what you're doing outside of your Nova round. You could just be a monk and try to punch things or hit them with a weapon if you wanted. The problem is, because our multi-target damage is going to be affected by our wisdom stat and our constitution stat even, which I'll get into in a second, we are not going to be bumping our dexterity or our strength. So in between our Nova round, damage is going to be pretty paltry on this character if you're just hitting stuff. There are some solutions to work around that. One would be to find a way to pick up the Shillelagh cantrip, so we can use our wisdom modifier for our attacks with a quarterstaff or a club. We could get that by taking a level of druid or nature cleric even, or taking a couple levels of ranger and getting the druidic warrior fighting style, or by sacrificing a feat to pick up the magic initiate feat. If it were me, I think I'd probably just do a level of druid. Personally, we'd get some other spells too, which might be nice to give us some utility and support options. On the other hand, we could start with a level of fighter here. We are actually taking some fighter levels later anyways. Spoiler alert. So this wouldn't hurt quite as much. Starting fighter would let us grab, for example, the archery fighting style, which means we would have a +2 to hit with ranged weapons, which means we could, say, take a longbow and at the very least not suffer too much with our modest dexterity score when we're making attacks outside of our Nova round. I don't love this personally because some of the cool monk features like Stunning Strike require a melee weapon attack. But you might decide that Stunning Strike is too unreliable and you want to save your key points for AoE damage, area of effect. So this is an okay backup for when you're not doing that AoE damage. For our purposes here today, I'm not going to take either of those options. I'm trying to build a character that maximizes their AoE damage at the expense of everything else. I don't claim you should do this, but as always, I like to explore the possible, right, from a numbers perspective with a certain character concept or goal in mind. If I were playing this character in an actual game, I think I probably would start with a level in Druid and grab Shillelagh. You do what you feel is best. So yes, we are a monk level 1. And as for our race, we are actually going all in on Fizbans today, baby, because you guessed it, we're taking one of the new draconic races, one of the new Dragonborn. Now, to be honest, I don't actually think it matters that much which Dragonborn you pick. There's a chromatic option, a gem dragon option, and a metallic option. Unless you're going to be playing this character at level 15 and beyond. We are primarily here for the breath weapon attack, which I'll get into in a second, but each of them gets one. I will say that the chromatic dragon breath attack is a line, which is usually a little tougher to hit multiple enemies with than a cone that the gem and metallic dragon get. So I'd almost definitely go with gem or metallic. But aside from that, the major differences are gem dragonborn get to send telepathic messages and occasionally fly, which is great. And I think that the selection of damage types for the gem dragon breath is a little better, but I think if it were me, I would probably go metallic because, first of all, I like good dragons. I want a lightning-based breath attack later on. Spoiler alert. And also, I really love the metallic breath weapon feature that you get at level 5. The first thing we do once we've chosen our Dragonborn race is choose a draconic ancestry. Assuming we went metal, I would go bronze, which is associated with lightning because, as I said in my Storm Sorcerer Tempest Cleric video, I like lightning. You might prefer another type, and that's fine until late game anyway for this character. Anyway, we're going to have resistance to the damage type associated with that metallic ancestry, so we would get resistance to lightning damage, which is nice. Let's talk about their 2 breath weapons. First, right at level 1, we're told that when you take the attack action, you can replace one of your attacks, right now we only have one, of course, with a breath weapon attack. It's a 15-foot cone, unless you want chromatic, of course, in which case it's a 5-foot wide line that's 30 feet long, and each creature in the area has to make a dexterity saving throw based on our constitution modifier, or take 1d10 damage. Half if they save. This is a pretty unique thing to see in D&D. Instead of requiring our action, it just requires one of our attacks when we take the attack action. That's very interesting. Now, the fact that the DC is based on our constitution does bum me out a little bit. I understand why they did it. By using a stat that pretty much every character wants, they made it a little easier to ensure that almost every class kind of benefits from this feature. On the other hand, making it based on a non-caster or attack-based stat kind of also guarantees that most characters aren't going to get the DC for this breath attack as high as it can go. As we almost always, with maybe the exception of a tank-focused build, are going to want to max some other stat before we max our constitution, right? I wish there were a little more flexibility here on which stat we use for the DC on this, but it's fine. We'll be okay, and you get to do this proficiency bonus times per day, and the damage does scale as we level. Also, for metallic dragons, when you hit level 5, instead of doing a damage-based attack as your breath weapon, we can do either an enervating breath, which forces a constitution save, or an enemy is incapacitated. Any enemy that's in the area of effect is incapacitated until the start of our next turn. Yikes. Or repulsion breath, which requires a strength save, or they are pushed 20 feet away and knocked prone. Now, constitution and strength tend to be pretty high saving throws for most enemies in D&D, but either of those are pretty potent. Especially incapacitated in a 15-foot cone is kind of unheard of, I think, in D&D, at least as a level 1 racial feature. Granted, it doesn't last that long, it is a con save, but being able to potentially incapacitate multiple targets for a round is really something. Enemies that failed their saving throw would lose concentration on spells and won't be able to take actions or reactions, right? Potentially very strong. Anyway, as for our abilities, I assume, as always, that we are doing the point buy method, and so I would say take a 15 in your constitution, and take a +1 there, so you've got a 16 to start. Take a 15 in your wisdom as well, and take your +2 there, and then a 14 dexterity. As for equipment, arguably, one downside about being a monk is that a lot of your class benefits require you to be unarmored and not using a shield. On the flip side, the nice thing about being a monk is that you don't really need a lot of equipment to start the game with, at least. So I would take the gold buy option here and just get a longsword and then whatever else you might need. Maybe a quarterstaff for level 1 as well if you're actually playing the game at level 1. Or of course, if you are getting shillelagh, you're going to want one. Then as a level 1 monk, we get the unarmored defense feature. If you're not wearing any armor or not using a shield, then your armor class equals 10 plus your dexterity modifier plus your wisdom modifier. This is kind of okay if you're going to get both your dex and your whiz like really high eventually, though it does mean we're not getting to take advantage of shields or magical armor. There are magical solutions though, like bracers of defense, for example, so I generally don't mind so much the fact that we can't use magical armor. Now, unfortunately for this build, as I've said, we're not going to be bumping our dexterity at all in the interest of more area of effect damage. So our AC is going to be pretty crummy without things like bracers of defense, especially as we get into late game and our AC kind of stops scaling. Right now, it's a 15, which isn't great. It's not terrible. I would probably just say, you know what, screw it. Start as a level 1 fighter and let's get some medium armor. Except at level 1 as a monk, we also get the martial arts feature, which tells us that as long as we're not wearing armor or using a shield or using weapons that aren't monk weapons, hence the quarterstaff for now, which is considered a monk weapon, you can use dexterity instead of strength when making attacks, and use a martial arts die, which is a d4 for now, but it scales as we level, for unarmed strikes and for monk weapons if we want. Also, we can make an unarmed strike as a bonus action when we take the attack action. Okay, here's the reality. For the purposes of this build, again, I'm not going to care about really any of those things very much. I don't anticipate making a ton of unarmed strikes with our bonus action, for example, at least not turning our Nova round. You, on the other hand, might care very much about doing those things, particularly during your non-Nova rounds. But if you don't, you might want to consider starting fighter, like I say, and just throwing on a shield and medium armor. You wouldn't get the movement speed bonuses that we're about to pick up, and that's kind of a big deal, I think, for this build, but you might value your AC over everything else, and you could do it. Personally, I like my monks to be, well, stereotypical monks, and I really do want that move speed bonus, so I'm going naked. Okay, fine, I'll wear a gi. You do what you want to do. At level 2, we get key points. So from now on, we get 1 key point per monk level, so we've got 2 for now, and we use those key points for, famously, everything. Because of that, I personally don't think 1 key point per level is enough. But at least they reset on a short rest. For now, we can use those key points to do 3 things. Flurry of blows, which tells us that for a key point, if we take the attack action, we can make 2 unarmed strikes instead of the usual 1 we get by default. Great if you're building a single target weapon-focused attack monk. We're not. You also get the patient defense ability. For 1 key point, we can take the dodge action as a bonus action. Not bad. Taking the dodge action gives disadvantage to enemies on all incoming attacks, and advantage on dexterity saving throws for us until our next turn. And then there's Step of the Wind. That lets us disengage or dash as a bonus action for 1 key point, and we can double our jump distance. Keep this one in mind for later. Also, as a level 2 monk, we get unarmored movement, so if we're not wearing armor or using a shield, we get a plus 10 to our movement speed for 40 movement speed total right now. Again, you might not decide this is super important. I think for this character, positioning yourself on your turn is going to be very important for our Nova round, and I'm going to want to get that extra move speed. Finally, we do get, thanks to Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, the dedicated weapon feature here as a level 2 monk, which tells us that we can make any non-heavy, non-special weapon a monk weapon. So I ditch the quarterstaff, unless you have Shillelagh, of course, and use that longsword now with 2 hands, because longswords are versatile, and there's no prohibition against using 2 hands to make a weapon attack. We could have done it with the quarterstaff too, for that matter. But anyway, now we can get a D10 on your attacks when you are using your longsword outside of your Nova rounds, using your dexterity score for hit and damage. At level 3, we get deflect missiles. So as a reaction with deflect missiles, we can reduce damage from a ranged attack when we're hit with one. It's a D10 plus our dexterity modifier plus our monk level. Not bad, honestly. Now you can spend a key point to redirect that attack back at an enemy, which is amazingly cool visually, but I think I'd personally probably save that key in most situations, especially on this character with our lowish dexterity. The damage we do from redirecting it won't be particularly reliable. And then, of course, at level 3, monks get their subclass, their monastic tradition, and obviously we are going with the way of the Ascendant Dragon. Here's what we read about the Ascendant Dragon Monk. The dragon god Bahamut is known to travel the material plane in the guise of a young monk, and legend says that he founded the first monastery of the Way of the Ascendant Dragon in this guise. The fundamental teaching of this tradition holds that by emulating dragons, a monk becomes a more integrated part of the world and its magic. By altering their spirit to resonate with draconic might, monks who follow this tradition augment their prowess in battle, bolster their allies, and can even soar through the air on draconic wings. But all this power is in service of the greater goal, achieving a spiritual unity with the essence of the material plane. Thematically, they could not have created a character more perfectly designed to make me happy. My favorite class, combined with my favorite fantastical creature, it's a match made in heaven. They might have fallen a little bit short on the mechanical aspect, but we're gonna make it work, dang it. All right, so first up, we need to decide how we unlocked the power of dragons within ourselves. You can figure it out for yourself or roll on a table that has some cool options, like a dragon taking an active role in shaping your inner energy to long stretches spent meditating around an ancient dragon's lair. Cool flavor stuff. And then we get the Draconic Disciple feature, which gives us a few little kind of utility and flavor options for the most part, including re-rolling failed intimidation or persuasion checks as a reaction, which will probably just fail again anyway due to our crummy charisma score, but hey. We also learn the Draconic language, or another language of our choice, and we get Draconic Strike, which lets us change the damage type of our unarmed strike to an elemental damage type if we want, like fire, cold, poison, acid, etc. That could come in handy if you run into resistance to a certain damage type, and especially before our unarmed strikes become magical. It won't help us much in our Nova round, but it might give us a little edge depending on the enemies that we're fighting at earlier levels here. But then there is the Breath of the Dragon, and here, of course, is the thing that we are most interested in. So when you take the attack action, we are told, you can replace one of those attacks with a 20-foot cone of elemental damage. Sound familiar? The big difference between this and our racial breath attack is that the cone here is bigger, the damage is smaller, the DC for the save that the enemies have to make is based on our wisdom modifier instead of constitution, but it's still a dexterity save, and we can choose the damage type each time we use it. Acid, cold, fire, lightning, poison. Okay. I like the area. A 15-foot cone is only potentially going to hit 6 medium or smaller creatures. A 20-foot cone could potentially hit 10. That's significant. I like the wisdom-based DC. We benefit a lot from a high wisdom score. The damage is poopy. 2 rolls of our martial arts die. At this point, that's 2d4 damage, or 5 on average. Still, the racial is only 1d10 at this point. That's 5.5, and it's a smaller area, actually. So for now, use whichever one is going to get you the most damage based on the number of targets you can hit. One sort of nice thing here is that you can do this proficiency bonus times per day like our racial breath weapon, but you can spend 2 key points to do it again if you're out of uses. So at least it's reusable, if at the cost of our 1 resource that we have to spend on everything that we do. The damage will get to 3 rolls of our martial arts die eventually, and our martial arts die, like I've said, does scale with monk levels. So if we're going to lean into this, which we are really encouraged to persevere with monk levels, which we will. At level 4, then we get Slow Fall, one of my favorite flavor abilities in game that I wish I got to use more. With Slow Fall, you use your reaction when you fall to reduce your damage by 5 times your monk level, meaning that at this level, we would likely fall 50 to 60 feet before taking any damage, which is so cool. Don't you dare ever walk downstairs again. And then, of course, at level 4, we get our first ability score increase, or feat. I've mentioned that I wasn't planning on doing a lot with the unarmed strike bonus action. for this build, right? Definitely if you have nothing better to do with your bonus action, punch and kick away. For this character who's focused on area damage and with a high wisdom score, our bigger concern, I think, is getting as many enemies into our area of effect damage as possible. One of the best ways to do that, I think, is via the telekinetic feat. So that's what we're taking here at level 4. Nice bonus. Telekinetic is a half feat, so we get to bump our wisdom score by 1, meaning that we have an 18 wisdom now, which is awesome. And then with telekinetic, you learn the mage hand cantrip, you can make it invisible, and cast it without components. All nice for utility and flavor. More importantly, for us, as a bonus action, you can move one creature within 30 feet of you, 5 feet toward or away from you, barring a strength saving throw based on your wisdom modified difficulty check. With a cone of 20 for your area of effect, or even 15 on the racial, oftentimes I think that 5 feet is going to make all the difference between just getting one more enemy inside the area of effect of your breath weapon. Also, sometimes you might have like a perfect shot on a few enemies, but you've got one ally who's a melee ally, right? And they're kind of in the way. And you're going to want to nudge them just a little bit out of the way so they don't get caught in the blast zone. And a creature can fail their save willingly and just be moved if they want to be moved, right? This feat is just perfect for what we're trying to do here, I think. At level 5, we get a ton of stuff. First up, our martial arts die goes from a d4 to a d6. That's nice. Our breath attack now does 2d6 damage. Second up, our dragon breath weapon scales up to a 2d10, even nicer. Third up, we get that metallic breath weapon that I talked about at the beginning, so you could potentially incapacitate or shove multiple enemies instead of damaging them if you wanted, assuming they failed their saving throw. Fourth up, we get Stunning Strike, that most controversial of monk abilities that everyone seems to either think is really overpowered or fairly meh. For us, it's mostly meh, because it requires you to hit with a melee weapon attack. Now, if we took Druid, or found another way to get Shillelagh, this is a lot better. Otherwise, hitting with a melee weapon attack isn't necessarily a foregone conclusion for us, but if we do, we can spend a key point to force a Constitution saving throw, and that's the main reason that people in the meh camp cry, meh! Has anyone ever cried meh? Seems like that would sort of defeat the purpose of the word. But if they fail their Constitution saving throw, the enemy is stunned until the end of your next turn, which is really powerful. I can even see potential here where you say stun a target with one attack, and then with your second attack, breath weapon, and then the stunned creature at least would auto-fail their saving throw, because that's what stunned targets do, among other things. But we have a better use for that second attack, because yes, at level 5, 5th up, I suppose, we get the extra attack feature. And this is where things really start to feel pretty fun and unique for this character, I think. So, in case you hadn't noticed, both the breath weapon we get from our racial ability and the one we get from our monk ability tell us that when we take the attack action, we can replace one of our attacks with the breath weapon. So far as I can tell, there's no reason why if we had 2 attacks, and we do now with extra attack, we couldn't replace one of them with a dragon breath weapon and the other one with the Ascendant Dragon breath weapon. So we take the attack action, but instead of actually punching or kicking anything, we are in a 15-foot cone of lightning, and then in a 20-foot cone of flame or cold or whatever. Now, damage aside, this is conceptually one of the coolest things, and I love it with all of my heart. That's pretty much the story of the monk for me in a nutshell, I suppose. But anyway, this is what we've been building towards. Being able to do 2 area of effect spell-like damage attacks in a single turn without having to use action surge or meta magic is pretty dang unique in D&D. So let's see where we can take it from here. At level 6, with extra attack secure and a few key points under our belt, I think we need to take a slight detour to maximize this Nova round. So our meditative dragon-inspired monk has decided that their mind and their spirit have been fairly well honed, but they need to spend a little more time improving the vessel, el cuerpo, the body. So we're going to take some fighter levels now. So as a fighter, level 1, we get Second Wind, which lets us, once per short rest, as a bonus action, heal ourselves for a D10 plus our fighter level. Nice little survivability feature. And then we get a fighting style. And you know what? I'm going to just say pick your favorite here. It's going to depend largely on kind of how you've built your character up to this point. If you went with Shillelagh, I'd probably grab Dueling for +2 damage to one-handed weapon attacks. If you decided to just wear armor and forego the movement and like martial arts benefits, I'd consider Defense, I think, for a +1 to my AC. Superior Technique actually would be a good one, I think, to give you access to a variety of maneuvers that aren't necessarily dependent on making a weapon attack. I think if it were me, and I didn't take a druid level to start, I'd probably go with the archery fighting style here. That way we could grab a longbow, we'd have a much better chance to hit, at least with a +2 to hit that we get from the archery fighting style when we're in between our Nova rounds. You know, now having that 14 dexterity would be the equivalent of an 18 dexterity, at least when it comes to trying to hit a target, and that feels a lot better. Granted, we wouldn't be able to use Stunning Strike at all if we were making ranged weapon attacks, but if you didn't take Shillelagh, between our lowish hit chance and the enemy making a con save against a Stunning Strike, let's be honest, you're not getting much out of Stunning Strike anyway. Okay, so time for our first damage report at level 6. My assumption here is that during your Nova round, you're going to use a bonus action, first off, to telekinetically bump either an enemy into the area of your cones or bump an ally out of the area of your cones, so you can hit as many enemies as possible. Then you take the attack action, replacing one of your attacks with your Dragonborn breath weapon, and the other attack with your Ascendant Dragon Monk breath weapon. You have 40 feet of move speed, so getting yourself into the best position to hit as many enemies as possible should be pretty manageable most of the time, I'd hope. To that end, I'm going to assume, for number crunching purposes, that we've got 3 enemies inside of our blast zone. That might be too generous. Obviously, you're not going to get this all of the time. Of course, there probably will be times when you can get more than that, right? I have to pick a number, and the number I pick is 3. You can adjust accordingly if the number changes. So at this level, that would be 2d10 for your racial breath weapon against your DC of 14 times 3 enemies, and 2d6 for your monk breath weapon against your DC of 15 times 3 enemies, for a total of 6d10 and 6d6 damage. So against an enemy with a +0 to their dexterity saving throw, you would do a total on average of 45 damage in this Nova round, and against enemies with a +2 to their dexterity saving throws, it would be 42 damage on average. One nice thing about calculating versus saving throws versus enemy armor class is that it's rare for enemies to have a really high dexterity saving throw. The average plus to dexterity saving throw for CR creatures in the monster manual at least is just a +2, which is why I used that number. But you can see what it looks like all the way up to a +15 to save in the spreadsheet that I put in the video description, so check that out. Also, the nice thing here is the consistency of the damage, even if the damage isn't crazy high, because even if the enemies make their saving throw, they still take half damage, right? Missed weapon attacks don't do half damage. Now, 45 damage for a Nova round is not amazing. Against a single target, it would be pretty good at this level, but divided up between 3, it's really not. It's less than a single fireball would do. That said, we do have the added bonus of being able to do this 3 times per day right now without spending any additional resources, and after that we can do at least our monk breath attack, if we wanted, a couple more times per short rest with our key points. And sure, a wizard or a sorcerer could do 3 fireballs per long rest at this level for more damage, but fireballs are notoriously at their relative strongest right when you get the spell, and we are about to get way better. Just give me one more level, because at level 7 we would be a fighter level 2, and we get Action Surge. Haha! So now, during our Nova round, we could Dragon Breath, Monk Breath, Action Surge, Dragon Breath, Monk Breath, so long as we had the uses of those breath attacks to do that, right? And again, numbers aside, the cool factor here is off the charts. I mean, heck, you could even do like lightning attack, then cold attack, then lightning attack, then fire attack or something, right? If you wanted to, just for the sheer spectacle of it. You could also like make your breath attacks and move in between those breath attacks. If say a target or two dies and you want to turn around or move over slightly to get a new target into the cone, right? I don't know. Have fun with it. It's really cool. And it's twice the damage now during your Nova round as last level. And compared to other Nova damage builds that I've done, now we are at the top of the class for total damage done. So that feels really cool. Let's keep going. Back to Monk, I think, at level 8. We're a Monk 6. We really want to get more key points, and we really want to get to Monk 11 as quickly as possible. So at level 8, we are a Monk 6, and we get key-empowered strikes. On the off chance that we are like regularly punching and kicking things, our unarmed strikes are now magical for the purposes of overcoming resistance to non-magical weapon attacks. And magical bludgeoning damage is less likely to be resisted than any of the elemental damage types that we were getting from our Ascendant Dragon Monk feature, but you might run into it once in a while. We also get +5 to our move speed, as long as, again, we're not using a shield or armor. So that's a total of +15 for a grand total of 45 move speed now. Very useful for maneuvering to line up our breath attacks as effectively as possible. And then we get our level 6 Ascendant Dragon ability, Wings Unfurled. Let's talk about this. So Wings Unfurled tells us that proficiency bonus times per day when we use Step of the Wind, and remember that's spending a key point to dash or disengage as a bonus action, we can fly. But, and Wizards of the Coast has taken some criticism for this, and I think fairly, we can only fly during this turn as the wings vanish at the end of the turn. It admittedly feels a little weak compared to other subclasses that get similar features. That said, I still think there will be times when we can make good use of this ability, especially with this build. I've talked about how important positioning is here, and there will be times that due to weather, difficult terrain, other enemies, terrain obstacles, etc., it would be difficult to position ourselves in just the right way to get as many enemies as possible in the area of effect of our breath attack. Now, I can definitely see the use in, say, dashing as a bonus action or disengaging because an enemy is all up in our business, spending a key point, and then sprouting dragon wings, launching into the air, and strafing our hapless foes with several blasts of our dragon breath attacks before settling back down again somewhere that's advantageous for us. It's not something that you're going to need every round, thankfully, since we often want to be using our bonus action for a telekinetic shove, right? And we can only sprout these wings proficiency bonus times per day. But when we do need it, it will be really cool and really fun to have. Not to mention, of course, the occasional utility that we'll get of being able to, get to hard to reach places, across chasms, on top of roofs, etc., etc. As long as we can get there all in one turn before our wings disappear at the end of those 6 seconds, right? At level 9, we would be a Monk 7. We get the evasion ability, which is really nice when we have to make a dexterity save to take half damage against something like traps or a spell, or our arch nemesis, Negad, Ascendant Dragon Monk, who also has lots of breath attacks. We take half damage if we fail the dexterity saving throw, and no damage if we succeed. Fabulous. And then we also get Stillness of Mind, which tells us that we can use our action to end a fear or charm effect on ourselves. I love how we're getting all of these abilities to counter things that dragons typically do, right? Dex saves for all those breath attacks, and an ability to end fear for dragon fear, right? Okay, so for our damage report at level 9, we are looking much stronger. Now, on our Nova round, we're going to, again, I think either telekinetically shove one enemy or ally with our bonus action, or dash or disengage and then fly with our bonus action. Whatever you have to do to get the most enemies you can in your blast zone. But then, as an action, we're going to take the attack action and make both of our attacks with our breath weapons, right? Then action surge and make both again. The damage dice have not increased since our last check, but our DC has gone up by 1 thanks to our proficiency bonus increase. And speaking of which, with a proficiency bonus of 4 now at level 9, we could do all of this twice per day if we wanted, assuming that you got at least 1 short rest in between to reset action surge. And that's nice. So against a group of enemies with a +0 to their dexterity saving throw, we would do on average 92 damage total during our Nova round, and against a group of enemies with a +3 to their dexterity saving throws, it would be 83 damage total. Compared to other Nova builds at level 9, now we have fallen just a little bit behind the average, but we can do our full routine twice per day now, which is more than a lot of those builds can do. And then we can add our monk breath at least several more times if we wanted to spend the key for some continued area of effect damage. Plus, we can jump out of 10-story buildings anytime we want to and not take any damage. So at level 10, we are a monk 8. We get another ability score increase for feat. You could argue that we'd be better off bumping Constitution over Wisdom for our Nova round, at least because the damage from the racial breath weapon is more. But considering that Wisdom also bumps our armor class and even our attacks if we took Shillelagh, as well as the stunning strike DC and other monk features that we'll be getting later, I think I'd go Wisdom first personally, and so I'm going to cap Wisdom here, and we're at a 20 Wisdom, which feels nice. At level 11, we'd be a monk 9, and our Dragonborn breath weapon at character level 11 goes to 3d10. Another d10 is very welcome. We also get an unarmored movement improvement. We can now move up vertical surfaces and across liquid on our turn, which is another favorite ability that we probably don't get to use enough and might not be all that useful in game, but when you get to use it, it'll be really cool. At level 12, we're a monk 10. We get Purity of Body, which tells us that we are now immune to disease and poison. You know, this will be really nice when you need it, no question, particularly to the poison. Disease probably isn't going to come up all that often in most campaigns. But then we do get another 5 feet of move speed bonus, so that's a total of 50 move speed now, which is fantastic. At level 13, we're a monk 11, and our martial arts die goes to a 1d8, just in time for our Breath of the Dragon feature to use 3 martial arts dice instead of 2, going then from 2d6 to 3d8. It's a pretty nice increase, especially when we're using it twice on our Nova round. We also, at this level, get the Aspect of the Worm feature from Ascendant Dragon Monk, and that's going to give us another potential use of our bonus action now, probably during our non-Nova rounds, and it can be situationally really nice. So as a bonus action, we can create an aura of draconic power. It lasts for 1 minute. It radiates only 10 feet from us, so it's not a really big range, but during that minute, we can potentially do 2 things. First up, Frightful Presence. When you first create the aura, and as a bonus action on subsequent turns, you can force an enemy within your aura to make a wisdom save, the DC of which is based on your own wisdom, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to max wisdom first, or they are frightened of you for 1 minute. Now, they do get to repeat the save at the end of each turn, but as long as they keep failing that saving throw, they could, again, potentially be feared for an entire minute. And if they make their saving throw, you could just repeat it again on your next turn as a bonus action. If they don't make their saving throw, you can frighten somebody else. Meaning, you could potentially have multiple enemies feared for a minute each throughout the course of an entire combat encounter. This is a decently powerful fear ability, and Frightened is a pretty strong debuff. It causes them to have disadvantage on their attacks and ability checks while they can see you, and they're unable to move closer to you. Now, sure, there are a lot of enemies that are immune to fear, but there are a lot more enemies that aren't. And sure, you have to use your bonus action every time to do it, but it lasts for an entire minute on each enemy that you hit with it. I think it's a good ability. Alternatively, instead of doing Frightful Presence, you could gain resistance with your aura. So you could choose an elemental damage type, and it grants you and your allies within the aura resistance to that damage type for 1 minute. And again, when I say elemental damage type, I'm talking fire, cold, acid, poison, lightning, right? This is the lesser use of our aura, I think. I mean, if I could use it as a reaction, that would be nice. If the aura were larger, that would be nice. But being in a place where you know ahead of time that you're going to be taking damage of a certain type and wanting everyone to huddle close together so as to make a really nice target for a potential area of effect spell or breath attack that's going to do that damage type that you're trying to be resistant to feels a little counterintuitive to me. Still, once in a while, it'll be useful. I imagine primarily using our aura for fear. Now, we can only use our aura once per day for free, but after we can use it again for 3 key points. That's expensive, but we do have 11 key points per short rest now, so it's not inconceivable that we would have this available 2 or 3 times per day, especially on this character whose damage isn't going to be amazing outside of our Nova rounds. I can see this actually becoming like the primary use of our key points. We blow some stuff up, and then go into controller debuff mode primarily. And I think it would be a viable character and one that, frankly, I'd probably like to have in my party. So, for the damage report at level 13, we have had some nice additional bumps since last check. Our Dragon Breath has gone up to 3d10, our Monk Breath to 3d8. Our Wisdom and Proficiency bonus have both increased, to say nothing of the defensive, control, and utility features that we've gained. I'm feeling pretty good about my Dragon Monk. And during our Nova round, against a group of enemies with a +0 to their dexterity saving throw, we would do, on average, 161 damage total. And against +4 to their saving throws, it would be 142 damage total, on average. So we're a little closer to the middle of the pack now compared to other Nova damage builds. And again, we can do this multiple times per day, which feels great. At level 14, we would be a Monk 12, and we get another ability score increase or feat. I would say we ought to bump our Constitution now to 18. I wish we could have gotten our Constitution higher sooner, both for the extra tankiness and bump to our con save, but also, of course, because it improves the DC of our racial breath attack. But I stand by the decision to focus Wisdom first. At level 15, at this point in our character's career, I think they take a step back from focusing on either their mind or their body and instead turn their focus toward the greatest of all dragons, the god of justice and good, the great Bahamut himself. Perhaps we seek greater enlightenment, or we were instructed by the bronze dragon who first helped us unlock our draconic power to pay homage to him. Whatever your reasons, we're going to take a couple levels of cleric here. So yes, at level 15 we're a cleric 1, and first up we get to pick some spells. I would say pick your favorites. There are some decent cleric cantrips and spells to choose from. I'm not really going to assume that we're using any one spell in particular during our Nova round, but maybe I'll just mention that Toll the Dead could be an okay option if you don't have Shillelagh or the archery fighting style and are looking for damage between your Nova rounds. Bless is, of course, one of the best buff spells in the game, and will make your whole team appreciate you if nobody else on your team is using it currently. And it will actually even give you a much better chance to hit, so that could come in handy as well. You know, actually, the one spell that I might try to make use of during the Nova round here is Bane. I've never really talked much about Bane before. It's basically the anti-bless, right? You target up to 3 enemies within 30 feet and you try to curse them. If they fail a charisma save, which is probably the lowest saving throw for most enemies in D&D, then they have to subtract a d4 from all future attacks and saving throws for a minute, or until you lose your concentration, of course. This will actually be great for our breath attacks, of course, but even the fear that you're going to be throwing out, probably the stunning strike that you might be using. So yeah, it's a pretty decent spell for us. Now, am I going to assume that your target has Bane on them when I crunch the numbers? Nah. Admittedly, there will be plenty of times, I think, where the fight starts and you just don't have a great opportunity to unleash your breath bombs because the enemies are too spread out or too far away. And so taking a round to throw out Bane on a bunch of enemies so that they do less damage and are more likely to fail their upcoming saving throws would be a pretty decent option. But because it costs an action and the enemy gets to save against it, even though most enemies will fail that save, I just have a hard time assuming that you're going to be using this every time before your Nova round. And the reality is your party might benefit more from Bless anyway. Still, I'd keep it in my back pocket as an option. At level 1, clerics, of course, get their subclass, their divine domain, and I want to go Tempest, as I'm sure many of you probably predicted long ago. Some of you might be wondering why we waited this long to take it. We'll discuss in a minute, but yes, we're going to be a Tempest cleric for one main reason. Wrath of the Storm is not that reason, though that's the ability that we get at level 1. It is a decent ability. When an enemy within 5 feet of you hits you with an attack, you can use your reaction to do 2d8 lightning or thunder damage to them, barring a dexterity saving throw. Okay, fine. It's a decent ability at level 1. At level 15, it kind of sucks. But anyway, you can use it your wisdom modifier times per day. But at level 16, we would be a cleric too, and we get Channel Divinity. So all clerics get Channel Divinity. They can use it once per short rest to turn undead, which forces undead to make a wisdom save or spend their turn running away from you, basically, for 1 minute. But Tempest clerics can also use their Channel Divinity for Destructive Wrath, and that's why we're here, of course. Destructive Wrath tells us that when we roll lightning or thunder damage, we can use Destructive Wrath to deal max damage instead of rolling. This is why we're here. This is why we wanted to go with the Bronze Dragon for our Metallic Dragon ancestry, because the damage we do with our racial breath weapon is still a little better than with our monk breath weapon. It's 3d10 for the racial versus 3d8 for the monk, right? Now, it's not a huge difference, of course. And so if you took a different ancestry because you would rather have a different damage type resistance, or you just think silver dragons are cooler or whatever, I don't think it's a huge deal, because remember, you can choose the elemental damage type you do with your monk breath weapon every time you use it. So you could choose lightning when you wanted to couple it with Destructive Wrath. Now, why did we wait this long to get this ability? The truth is, it's going to add right now about 14.5 damage on average to one use of our Draconic Breath on our Nova round, right? And we can do our Channel Divinity once per short rest. By comparison, beelining to Monk 11 added 13 damage to our Nova round, so almost as much, but of course we can use our Monk Breath weapon a lot more than just on our Nova round. And getting more key points is always important as a monk, not to mention the ability score increases that we wanted to increase our wisdom and our constitution and pick up the telekinetic feat. I could see an argument for going, say, Monk 5, then Fighter 2, then Cleric 2. Our level 9 damage report would have been a smidge better, but I think our character would have been a lot worse outside of our Nova round. Anyway, at this point, it's a nice little bump for us, not to mention the increased support and utility that we get from Cleric. And then finally, for us, at level 17, we would be a Monk 13, I think. It's hard to know what to do for the last level, at least the last level that I report on. If the game were ending here, truly, I think I probably would go Cleric 3 for second level Cleric spells, or maybe even Fighter 3 for a fun Fighter subclass. Ooh, Purple Dragon Knight. Nah. But assuming that we're going to go all the way to 20 with this character, I probably go back to Monk here so that I can at least pick up Diamond Soul, which is a really nice ability that we get at Monk 14, which would be next level. Anyway, for now, we just get Tongue of the Sun and Moon. Not a great feature mechanically, but it could be useful outside of combat occasionally. You can basically communicate with any creature that can speak a language. And do remember that our Dragonborn breath weapon goes up to a 4d10 now. So that happens at the same time as we get our final proficiency bonus bump. So we could potentially do, with a proficiency bonus of 6, our full Nova round 3 times per day, assuming short rests in between, right? And that feels nice. So for our final damage report, then, we have again had some nice bumps. Our constitution, and thus the DC for our Dragonborn breath attack, has gone up. We've added Destructive Wrath, which means that one of our dragon breath attacks will hit for 40 flat damage on every target instead of 22 on average. So against a group of enemies with a +0 to their dexterity saving throws, we would do 249 total damage on average. And against a group of enemies with a +5 to their dexterity saving throws, it would be 215 total damage on average. So still comfortably in the middle of the pack compared to other Nova damage builds, but doable multiple times per day, potentially. And you get all the fun flavor of being a dragon-empowered Dragonborn monk. So, final thoughts. You know what? I feel a lot better about the Ascendant Dragon Monk now than I did right after I read the, updated description of them when Fizbans became official last week. I'll admit I am still a little annoyed with Wizards of the Coast, if I'm being honest, for not making this subclass a little more easy to play, for making it a little underpowered, in my opinion. But again, I still think we can make a decently powerful character here, and more importantly, a really fun character to play, I think. And now, of course, you don't have to build your Ascendant Dragon Monk this way. You could try to make a more traditional monk that punches and kicks things a lot, that tries to take advantage of Stunning Strike and then just has an AoE attack that they can pull out once in a while. For me, though, that AoE attack that you get from the Ascendant Dragon Monk is just not enough damage to really be worth using it almost ever, unless we really try to lean into it and build around it, right? And create this burst damage area of effect focused character. The fact that the breath attack you get as an Ascendant Dragon Monk and the one that you get from the new Dragonborn races are both usable to replace an attack on your action is so very unique that I think if you're going to build an Ascendant Dragon Monk at all, it makes the most sense, at least from a purely mechanics perspective, to try and get the most out of what makes this subclass unique. If you primarily want to be punching and kicking and stunning things, I think you should go Mercy Monk. And I've got a pretty decent build for one there, I think. If you want to act like a dragon, however, who can fly over their enemies, raining down fire and lightning and striking fear into their hearts with the awesome draconic might that is within you, that's when you play the Way of the Ascendant Dragon. And so that's the episode today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I love you. You're fantastic. And I thank you so much for watching, for all of your support. Check out the rest of the content in the channel. If you don't already, I think there's lots of good stuff there. But yeah, like, subscribe, consider joining, all of those things. Until next time, I hope you have a fantastic day, a fantastic week, and that you get to play lots of D&D. So take care. Bye. No, don't say that. Never mind. Winning the battle of, oh boy. Boop-a-doop-a-doo. Action economy. To pay homage. Homage. That's not a difficult word. Homage